So now I'm going to review what we might consider a national program. Actually, it would be a transitional program to get out of the mess that we are in. It is, I make no bones about it, what I would call a socialist revolutionary program. And it's one that can only be implementable when the people of the United States actually overthrow the government of the United States, or otherwise gain such weighty advantage, such leverage from the people that they induce the rulers to engage in structural reforms that are of no benefit whatsoever to the rich, but which benefit the 99%. And I would say even more specifically, the percent of people who are 90% and bottom, because they've really been in trouble. By the way, this does recall a statistic. I know that back in 2001, Paul Krugman wrote an article in which he cited the statistics of Emmanuel Saez, who said that fundamentally the truth was that during the Bush years, the only segment of the population that actually was ahead, that didn't lose money, was the top 10%. And what Saez did that was different was, besides controlling for inflation, he also looked at the rise of the cost of living because people needed more things, right? And he's talking about since 1973, when the mess begins. It's when the mess begins, when we no longer have currency based on precious metals for the first time, in effect, in human history on a large scale. Anyway, what Saez took into account was increased families paying greater child care expenses, for instance, but also needing iPhones and becoming very fond of many, many gadgets, and so on and so forth. And actually, the electronics industry made life more complicated and more expensive. There's no doubt about that. Okay, I want to read fragments now of the Socialist Action Transitional Program for a New Society. The first thing that we would do, and it's certainly something that has been done before, and I suppose our best model here would be Cuba. Cuba, a year after its existence, nationalized its banks. Okay, it nationalized corporations that were operating there. It redistributed land among peasants. It installed a guaranteed annual income. Their optimal goal was guaranteed work, but where it didn't occur, there was a guaranteed living income going on. In addition, the state paid for all manner of entertainments, including many movies, plays, theaters, productions, so on and so on and so forth. That gives you the money. Nationalizing corporations, that gives you a very great deal of money. Another part is to basically transitionally but radically cut down the U.S. military budget. That would free up hundreds of billions of dollars to repair our infrastructure and to install alternative modes of energy. Other parts of the program, well, the immediate and full withdrawal of the U.S. from countries like Afghanistan and Pakistan, and the closing down of U.S. bases around the world. Basically, we do not believe that we can ever resolve the problems that we have while imperialism exists, while one set of very rich countries exploits the rest of the world, composed mostly of people who are in much poorer countries. A socialist revolution would indeed involve, in stages, increased wealth, increased investment, the sharing of technology, and so forth, to raise the standard of living of the world. Obviously, it's not printed in the program per se, but those of you who are eco-socialists, I want you to know that Socialist Action in particular is extremely conscious of eco-socialist issues, and we've generated pamphlets that address that, pamphlets that are written at a high scientific level, actually. And so basically cutting the military budget, nationalizing banks and so forth, having tax revenues then that are fairly collected, and are fairly collected with the criteria being that the people are first. In Cuba, it's well known, it's a slogan, and it's a slogan that's pretty universally, I think, accepted and believed by the Cuban people, which is that children come first, that it is the education and the fulfillment of children's lives that come first. Cuba is under an immense embargo, which over the years has directly and indirectly actually killed hundreds of thousands of people. And Cuba had to start inventing its own pharmaceuticals because they were boycotted from Cuba. This is just an example. Another thing, reduce the work week, again, a transitional form, reduce the work week to 30 hours a week with a 40-hour wage, what was normally a 40-hour wage. And as I say, too, there would have to be the reestablishment of a guaranteed livable income, a real living income. So in other words, an income that would be based on average union wages as we know them today. Although, of course, we know union wages have actually sunk in GM, for instance, which was quote-unquote rescued by Obama. But the workers that are now hired at GM make $14 an hour, whereas once upon a time they made in the low 30s an hour. And of course, were scapegoats for fiscal crises of the state. We want further to nationalize all corporations. The only exception being that if there's a corporation that actually puts out a fine product and could actually survive, okay, by paying its fair share of taxes, we might shrug it off and back off. But you know what? That's not going to happen, and it's not going to happen because of figures that we have cited before about declining rates of profit and the which is due to the intensity of world competition, other sectors of the world in which wages are astonishingly, unspeakably cheap, and also in other parts of the first world, as it were, where their technology for production is everywhere as advanced as ours is. As far as how this country would be governed, well, that's for the people to decide. But we do believe that when industries are nationalized, they should be run by employee committees, or what we're used to saying, real workers' committees. And I would say that those people should primarily constitute the lower 80% of the population. Depending on how you judge the size of the working class, it's anywhere between 70 and 80%. In the opinion of this speaker, there are those who would say that everybody below 90% now has become working class, and would refer you perhaps to some of the statistics that we cited in earlier sessions that showed the momentous drop in net worth of the average American family or average American household since 2008, and how far gone it's down today, plus the immense loss of wages. Remember that Catherine Rampling, who I think I referred to in the last lecture, actually estimated that since September of 2008, the average household has actually lost $3,000 a year, not just $3,200 as Mark Zandi put out for the whole time period since the crash of 4 years ago. And I guess Catherine Rampling again figured into what the real cost of living is today, and actually what real inflation has been, because we are given extremely phony statistics on the rate of inflation.